Hi, I'm Lottie. I'm an author from Finland and my next book will be set in Finnish Lapland. So join me on my journey all across Lapland doing research for my new book. Welcome to my Lapland research trip for my book. I am now in a sleeper train for the very first time in my life and I'm so excited. I don't know if I'll be able to sleep because I'm just too excited. I took the upper bunk bed, of course, and there's a reading light. This was my first time ever travelling to Lapland. I travelled with my mum. We took a sleeper train from Tampere to Rovaniemi, which is where Santa lives. And after our first stop there, we will be driving even further north. The cabin was so compact and yet there was a sink, there was so much space for all our things. I was in awe. And because this trip is so special, I decided to keep a travel diary. And so my first entry was from the sleeper train. I slept from midnight until about 6 a.m. because I'd pre-ordered breakfast, which turned out to be a really bad idea because we only arrived in Rovaniemi at 7:20, but they woke us at 6 for breakfast. Way too early. But then again, that gave me a chance to try out the in-train shower. Insane! We arrived in Rovaniemi at 7:30, where our rental car was waiting for us. That's one of the reasons why my mum travelled with me, because I don't have a driver's licence, and in Lapland, things are really far spread, which means you do kind of need a car. You can get around by bus, but it's a lot more work and then you're really dependent on bus timetables and so on. And I was in a little bit of a hurry because I wanted to get to the bears and wolves and lynxes because we travelled to Ranua and we stayed at the Ranua Wildlife Park in an igloo. My first time staying in an igloo. Sadly, it was too cloudy for northern lights, but it was beautiful nevertheless. But now it is time for the wildlife park. Please join me. Hello, I'm here at the Ranua Wildlife Park in northern Finland doing research for my upcoming book. This is a park that is home to all of Finland's wild animals. As you can see, there are wolves, lynxes, brown bears, reindeer, moose, wolverines, owls, eagles, and many, many, many more. And I will have the absolute pleasure to talk to an animal carer, and some of the animals will be fed later today, so please come along. I can't tell you too much about my upcoming book yet because I'm not allowed. But yeah, I had to research animals, that's all I can say. I immediately fell in love with the wild park. The enclosures were massive and the animal carer told me that even they never approach the animals because they want to keep them as wild as possible. And all of them were really active, which is a good sign, I guess. I liked the signage at the park because I learned so much through reading the signs. And there were also animal carers who fed the animals twice a day and you could ask them whatever you want. I loved watching the animals feed. And something I found really fascinating was seeing that all these animals are really big personalities. For example, there were 2 Arctic foxes, one of which was really brave and bold, and the other one was timid and shy. I'm just here with the wolves right now. The wolves have just been fed, so they're walking around with a big chunk of meat. And there's a tiny little puppy, and the pup is eating right now. I guess the pup goes last after the alpha and the other adults. I had the absolute pleasure to be able to talk to 2 different animal carers. One of them told me about bears, especially brown bears, but the other one told me about birds, so owls, eagles, but then also the wolves, lynxes, and especially wolverines. And finally, we talked about what humans and kids as well can do in order to help wild animals. And there's many, many little things, such as, well, stopping global warming by
eating less meat or less animal produce, by travelling less, by using public transport rather than cars, by writing your local MP, telling them that you actually care about animals and can they please do something. I'm feeling really inspired right now.
I can definitely recommend visiting the wildlife park in the morning because that's when most of the animals were active. We saw them all running around, which was so exciting. And also, even though the park is open throughout the year, remember that some animals hibernate in winter. So if you want to see the brown bear, you've got to go in summer or autumn.
I will say my biggest surprise are the Wolverines. Can you see them? We've got a little Wolverine here. Oh my goodness, it's putting on a show for us.
The Wolverine might look cuddly and cute, but actually they are a huge problem in Finland because they kill a lot of reindeer, which obviously the reindeer herders don't like.
I love how wild and how huge the cages are. The animals really get to be wild, they get to roam around, they can hide if they want. That's amazing.
How lucky am I that this is part of my job?
What makes me so happy is to see that the animals get to live just like they do in nature, and very often the animals that live here, well, some of them were born in other zoos, but some of them were actually orphaned or injured, and that's why they now live in this wild park. And it's a gorgeous place for them to live, especially if they need human help, if they need to be fed, if they can't hunt anymore. It just makes me so happy to see how much space they have and how environmentally friendly everything is. And yeah, they don't perform circus tricks, they just get to live their wild lives. I honestly can't wait to return here in winter to see how the animals live in winter in the snow, especially animals like the Arctic fox, which was now grey and will be completely white in winter. So I'm definitely coming back.
After spending the entire day outside, my face was red hot and I needed tea and soup. Oh, and we tried some local rieska, which is the flatbread here in Lapland. Then my mum decided to rest, whereas I had other plans.
After a long day outside, us Finns love to go to the sauna, but we dip in the lake first. I think it's about 10 degrees Celsius outside right now. So I don't want to know how cold the lake is, but it's a Finnish tradition. So I'm gonna do this.
Then it was time for my travel diary entry, and of course I also had to write down everything I'd learned because I might need some of these stories for my book. One of the most interesting things I learned was what to do if you encounter a predator in the wild. I learned that the brown bear had rejected her cub, so sometimes baby animals can be orphaned. And I especially enjoyed learning about what humans can do in order to preserve wildlife. I'm sure that many of these stories and facts will one day be very, very helpful when it comes to my writing, but as I said, sadly, I'm not allowed to reveal anything about my book before the publisher has announced the book deal. So you have to keep guessing. Anyway, after a bit of writing, it was time to sleep, and oh my goodness, was I tired. I didn't even mind that we didn't get to see any northern lights. And then it was time to say goodbye to Ranua and head north. Ranua is just below the Arctic Circle, but my book is set 400 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. Usually I'm not a big fan of car rides, but the scenery was just so beautiful and it kept changing. It got more and more sparse the higher north we drove. Also, driving with my mum was surprisingly fun. That was part 1 of my Lapland research trip. Please join me for the next video soon. Bye!